Big things coming out of the Pacific with Super Rugby on the way. Lineups have just dropped. Y'all know what time it is. It's a Super Rugby edition of the On the Line Rugby podcast. Let's do this.
I need all the wins, yeah. Ain't no L's, I gotta get a no call and quits, yeah. Gotta keep on moving no matter how hard.
Here comes Danny Tucci-Zala, back to Baker, Baker with the fin. Kurt Baker in for DC, and this may well do it old glory with the try. The New Zealand Sevens legend, Kurt Baker with the cherry on top.
Can you believe it?
Welcome back to the On the Line Rugby podcast, a show brought to you by the Believe Sports Network. I'm your host, Mike Nagaishi, and welcome back. You know, today is going to be really dominated by the Pacific because it is my favorite time of the year. It is the first drop of team naming for Super Rugby. My favorite version of rugby union. Sorry, Premiership, you're getting a little bit sidetracked off the beaten path here, especially because of TRN. But, you know, we're back with the business, and I'm definitely happy to get started with this. In terms of really what I would be looking for, I think the biggest thing in terms of my things that I've gleaned from these rankings and breakdowns of the lineups is that a lot of teams will be rebuilding this year. This is a huge year for New Zealand Rugby to show off their younger talent, a year where the NPC really is getting on the rise again. You know, a lot of these younger guys are finally getting their opportunity with a lot of these old hats getting moved, whether it's to France, to England, to Italy for some people, but mostly Japan. And really where these new coaches in these new spots, especially with the new All Black staff, will take this team. And I'm really excited to see what Super Rugby brings, not only to New Zealand, but to Australia as well moving forward. And I guess for first teams that I will break down, it'll have to be the mighty Chiefs. Up the Chiefs, you know, my team in Super Rugby as of yet. And they, I think, personally have a lot to prove this year, especially in game management situations. For those of you who've watched Super Rugby within the last couple years, I mostly like to, I'm sure everyone has seen it, rag on the Blues for their lack of game management. They're choking in big situations, but the Chiefs last year had probably, in my opinion, some of the worst times of that, especially against the Reds, who actually dealt them, I think, the first loss they've ever had at home on New Zealand soil in a while. I want to say it was over 10 to 15 years, probably going to be in the 20s, for all I know. But that's just off the top of my head. That's going to be huge for them. Their forward pack has been really gutted, especially with the losses of, like, for example, James Ryan from Ireland, who was on loan. You have Peter Augusto-Akula, one of my favorite players, at least in Super Rugby, leaving to go to France. You know, you have Bertie Retallick, who's obviously basically on the retirement trend, leaving to Japan, among others, especially in the back line as well. They also lose Brad Weber, one of the stalwarts at the position. You know, I think him and Aaron Cruden were some of the first players I've watched in Super Rugby. It's sad to see them go, but, you know, Brad's going on to bigger things and bigger checks. And, you know, the Chiefs are just going to keep moving with Clayton McMillan at the helm, who I think is a quality coach. I think the biggest thing that they did this year was bring back Daniel Rona, who was balling when he was there at the center spot. I think he'll get more stability now with regaining back Anton Leonard-Brown. Cross our fingers he does not get injured again. And as well as returning Caleb Trask. Now, a lot of people are split on the whole Caleb Trask dilemma. Here's why I stand on this. When I saw Caleb Trask debut in, I believe it was 2019, obviously he showed off that young playmaker mentality where, you know, he'll try to go for the home run ball, make a couple mistakes. You know, the Chiefs were not good that year. I want to say that was the year where they didn't win a game. And Sam Cane looked depressed on every single matchup. I don't blame him. That team was pretty junk. That was before the Clayton McMillan era. But, you know, being that as it is, I think Caleb Trask had kind of a, for those of you who watch the NFL coverage, you know, kind of an Alex Smith type, where he's a very good point guard, where he can manage the game and let other people go, but he's not going to be able to fully leverage the game, such as a Damien McKenzie would, to force your team to be over the top, I guess. and win the game through him. I like Caleb Trask. I think he hopefully has grown a lot in his sabbatical to Japan. I know his financials have gotten better, but I think the Japanese game is growing better. We've seen it over the last recent years. I really think that he could be the perfect 10 for that spot. I don't foresee, despite having Josh Ioane there, that they're really going to be able to stand up with him, just because, in my opinion, Josh Ioane, while he is talented at running with the ball in hand and distributing off platform, I wouldn't necessarily say, in my opinion, he would probably be the premier choice to manage 10. For me, the 10 was always that quarterback, that point guard spot that really just manages and distributes, kind of like a Steven Perofeta for the Blues, who we will also talk about later. But I think that having Caleb Trask there brings a lot of stability, and then obviously bringing Josh Ioane off would be huge. But I'd also understand, you did give Josh Ioane a pretty decent check. You probably want to see what he has going on for him. Perhaps he knows the system better than Caleb Trask does. We'll see. I doubt he may have forgotten the system, but we'll see who wins that job. That's going to be a big narrative for me, at least out of the Chiefs. And another one probably would be Liam Coombs-Fabling coming in to see where he slots. Obviously, the Chiefs are known as probably having some of, if not the best wings in the last recent years. At least since I've watched rugby, they have. And Liam Coombs-Fabling could easily slot in there. For those of you who do not know who he is, he has played for the Landers and was in 5 appearances. He did okay. He did only score a single try, but he had blips, and I mean very, very minute blips of brilliance. And I hope that he can bring that off the bench. He definitely has a lot of veteran players, a lot of guys who can learn from. Sean Stevenson specifically could be a huge thing for him. And I definitely think that he can build off of that and hopefully get more time moving forward as more of these older players leave. But he could be a developing option. As for their rivals to the east, we have the Blues. I mean, they're leaning hard into their back flare, obviously with the Fijian coach Vern Cotter coming in. They have a lot of, if not some of the best All Black talent on the roster still. They have new guys. I think my favorite one will probably be the winger Kane Banks coming from North Harbor, and definitely, Stevie P getting cemented as the definitive 10. Given the list, shout out, by the way, to the Black Jersey for allowing me to use his graphics. This is huge for me when it comes to really looking at every departure. So hats off to you. Where you stand with me. You're a legit dude. In terms of, though, with the lineup with the Blues, I think this has been Stevie P's team for a long time. I think with Beauden Barrett being on that almost communicator and manager portion rather than just being a solid 10, which is where Stevie P normally slots. This is his team. I think with the departure of Beauden Barrett, as sad as it is to say, he is now the 10. Zarn, despite getting moved to fly half from fullback, will probably still have a starting job at fullback unless they bring him off the bench at 10. I'm not sure how long this will last because Zarn Sullivan is obviously a great talent with the boot and ball in hand. I just don't see him as that manager of space like Stevie P is. We'll get to see. Hopefully he's grown from that, and that'll be another big narrative for me. They did lose a lot, though, in my personal opinion, with obviously Beauden Barrett being the biggest one. I thought it was really strange when my favorite player in New Zealand had all of his content scrubbed from the All Blacks page, especially when they had their thank yous from the World Cup. That was huge. I doubt at this rate, given what it is, that he's coming back, despite being on contract, I believe, until 2025 or something like that. It's going to be really sad to see him go. I'll probably end up seeing him in Japan when I end up going on vacation, hopefully soon. But if not, it'll probably be Beauden Barrett, quote unquote, coming to America. Obviously, a lot of people are going to say that's a hot take. He definitely has a lot more gas in the tank to then not come to America, but I have it on good authority. He will be joining the Miami Sharks in the next couple years. Crossing my fingers for that. I would love to see him play in South Beach, obviously, for tax reasons, but, for obviously to see him play domestic as well. I think that would be huge for the MLR. But Among other things, obviously, they've also lost a bunch of other big names. One of my other favorite players, RTS, is obviously returning to the Waz. Outside of that, it was a couple minor players, but really, those are the two big ones that they've lost. It saddens me to say it, but the Blues will probably be on the mend. We'll probably see a rebound year / rebuild year from them. As we all know, as I've just discussed earlier, they have their choking in big moments issues, despite having the massive roster that they have. I hope to see them rebound back. I'll definitely see them lean in more to that San Diego Legion MLR fans, to that back flare, more offloading, more doing basically what the Blues have always done, hopefully to better success. Obviously, Leon McDonald's a quality coach, and he will be joining Razor in that all-black coaching staff. Props off to him. Vern Carter has a lot of rebuilding decisions to do, and we'll see what happens with that. As for the biggest signing, I think for me personally, it would have to be the return of Angus Tavau into a blue jersey. I think losing a lot of the guys they did, such as Alex Hodgman and the boys, having Angus Tavau, who is a former blue player, at least back in the Tana Umaga days, but he has that experience. He's been in all black. He's been in the room. He's one of the more intellectual players of the game rather than just a physical mastermind. Will be huge for them. Definitely, though, we'll have to see how he rebulks back. Obviously, him being out for as long as he was, being back into broadcasting, a lot of people, myself included, have noticed the loss of mass on him. Obviously, I think he has no shot of, just staying skinny. He'll probably grow it back, but we'll have yet to see how he regrows back into his physical body that he was prior. Will his body transform? How will he move in different directions now with his either newfound weight or newfound gain weight? We'll see, but he's definitely going to have to earn that starting spot for me, and I definitely can see him leading that Blues pack moving forward over Patrick Tuipulotu. As for my hated rival down for the South, the Satyrs, I have a lot more questions than I have answers for you guys. Honestly, it's different to say the least. I was not expecting Rob Penny to get the job, if I'm being wholly honest with you. I personally don't think he's that great of a coach. Obviously, he has pedigree being with the U20s. He's played in and coached in Australia, notably for the Reds. But you could have did a lot better. I mean, maybe finesse the professor from Japan. I don't know. Anything really? Come on, no? Okay. I think Rob Penny will have to really prove to us, at least me specifically, that he can really man that team and man that roster. Obviously, the Crusaders are basically the Patriots for my NFL fans of Super Rugby. They're consistent. They're always going to be there. They'll definitely slap you around if you give them the opportunity to make a mistake. But as for a very relatively-ish retained roster with a lot of great free agency moves, they obviously develop well. But I think with the loss of Razor and Scott Hansen. Aha, my bad. There we go. Okay. With those losses, and obviously with Jason Ryan still staying with the All Blacks, it'll be interesting to see where they go. They had a lot of movement, obviously, in the center spot. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But in terms of just player development, they have a lot more on-track things. So I have middling hope. They'll obviously be in the mix. We'll see what happens with that. But their biggest gains in free agency to me was Leigh Halfpenny. Broke it to the boy, the black jersey. He is huge. I haven't seen him really since in Wales, really in a prominent spot since 2019. To me, at that point, from 2018 to 2019, when I really started watching rugby and playing, I thought he was one of the best 15s in the game. Obviously, with his ball in hand play, he does jackal. He has a little bit of kicking leg. He definitely has a boot when it comes to the drop goal. I think that'll help Fergus Burke in the 10 jersey moving forward. Hell, they could probably even slot him at 10. They have a lot of options with him. Obviously, with his increased ages, is probably going to be his farewell run in terms of serious play. I don't know how long they signed him for. Probably for the year. I'm not sure. But if he does well this year, best believe he's probably going to go to France or Japan. I don't see him sticking around unless the Crusaders can roll out the Brinks truck for him or whatever the New Zealand equivalent is. But for me, that was huge. I think having especially Will Jordan move to the wing, as all of you know, I do not agree with that option. But that shifts a lot of people. Having Will Jordan move to the wing, he's going to be with Sevu Reese and the boys, and all that's going to happen. Obviously, to take into account the Leicester-Fainga'anuku loss, but yeah, you get what I'm saying. As for though the centers, that's the biggest spot of loss for me, simply because they lost Jack Goodhue, always injured, Braden Enor, also always injured, to free agency, as well as utility back Leicester-Fainga'anuku, who we just talked about earlier. But they return Ryan Crotty, who, while his All Black days are definitely behind him, will bring in a lot of that veteran leadership, that Crusader culture back to the middle wing. He'll probably, if not always, be starting with the definitive also highlight for the Crusaders, Levi Almua in the 12 jersey. And I think that'll be an interesting pairing. Maybe Crotty will get off the bench time for the first couple games. We'll have to see. I would love to see him play the whole season, but we all know Super Rugby eats up on the body. Ryan Crotty is extremely old and playing well for his age. Japan, obviously, as we've seen, has taken a lot of physicality out of the game just because of the talent disparity between teams. So perhaps he will have to lean back into the contact, as Brody Retallick once did, as Damien McKenzie once did, and we'll see what happens from there. As for some other narratives that I think that could be huge, I think Revez Reihana and Manasa Mataele could be wild cards for the team this year. Obviously, both will be second to third choice options coming off the bench more than likely than not. Mataele, in my opinion, had some of his best years with the Satyrs coming off the bench. He was obviously with the Fijian back with a lot of flair. He brings a lot of power to the team and definitely some booting option off the wing. He could easily slot as a sub into centers, just kind of pulling that bus role that they did with him in the Hurricanes, but that's kind of debatable. Mataele probably won't be dethroning anyone in the starting lineup anytime soon. Obviously, he did good with the Force, especially in fantasy. Shout out to Super Brew for that. But, it's a big step in the right direction for the Satyrs to bring in that kind of stability. Revez Reihana, as we all know, for most of you who are fans for the Chiefs, he did not see a lot of time on the pitch. He is a talented player. I really thought he would have seen the pitch a little bit more often, but, being that as in May, he did not. I think this is for him a big chip on his shoulder year. If he can move, he's obviously going to be competing for that second place jersey. I mean, hell, all the jerseys are open, but in reality, it's probably going to be Fergus Burke's team, as he did shine in Super Rugby with Richie Mwanga injured. Reihana has time and obviously the opportunity to move up in the roster standings, take that spot, cement him as a Satyr. Perhaps it'll get him a better contract. Hopefully, we don't know, but it'll be nice to see him hopefully get out of his shell and back into what I know he can be based off his youth and provincial play that he's had. And to pivot to my second favorite team, the Drua out of Australia, they haven't obviously announced much of free agency movements, if any, other than their departures of their 11 players in free agency. But I think it's going to be a reload for them. Obviously they probably will get a new coach on the international level. I wouldn't be surprised if it's Fozzie, but cross your fingers on that one. If not, he'll probably end up going to Japan. Who knows? Maybe Eddie Jones won't even go to Japan. That'll break my heart, but such is life, and we will see with that. But they'll be reloading. They got talent across the board, even off their bench. Their bench stars were extremely talented, especially given the losses of Ravovo. They have openings to make players shine. Iosef Omasi, my breakout player for the Drua, will definitely see an uptick in touches. That's for damn sure. And we will hopefully see them playing in Suva full-time now, and I am fully excited for them. I definitely have them as an on-the-rise team and championship contender this year. Hopefully past the quarterfinal. it sucks, but we'll see what happens. As for our other provincial team, Moana Pacifica, my boy, you have done great. Hats off to you. Wow, I did not expect this much turnover in both departures and incoming representation. This is insane. I definitely think that they've shown up a lot this year. They were kind of like the Dallas Jackals of Super Rugby, obviously with the amount of losses they faced. They did not look as competitive in the Drua with their first year. Now I think they have that option. You can tell that after the World Cup, they have truly pivoted into moving towards developing the islands fully. It's about damn time, and I'm glad Tana Umaga has the opportunity, the former All Black, to return to his roots and bring up the next generation of Islander rugby. Keep the islands, and obviously, maybe send a couple to New Zealand, send a couple to Australia, but keep the islands. They have enough talent to take it to the finals of the World Cup if they really wanted to, and this all starts here. Now, they do have a lot of departures, but they also have a lot of incoming talent. I think Umaga is the perfect man for the job to then raise this talent. Obviously, a lot of people know him for the All Blacks career, but also the failure at the Blues. Obviously, he couldn't have done that bad as they kept him as an assistant coach for a majority of their time, especially in player development. A lot of players, specifically Caleb Clark, thank him for his development at back. I think that'll be huge for them, especially with a lot of their attack last year coming from Levi Almua and the forwards. This is going to be huge for them and their back line moving forward. Another some bit of big news that isn't really related to the team signings. I'm excited to see them finally be able to hopefully split home games between Tonga and Samoa, bring it back to the fan bases. We've obviously seen what the Drua have done in Suva. I think sellout crowds in Samoa and Tonga are going to be huge, and especially with their HQ hopefully going to be in Samoa in the next few years with some more money. Thank you, Silver Lake, by the way. They'll be in a better spot to hopefully lead for the next World Cup. I do not see it happening this year. I assume it'll be in the next 2 to 3 years, but that puts them right on time for the World Cup. Up the boys. As for firepower, they brought a lot. It's a laundry list, but I'm only going to go over a few that I thought were huge. They brought in a lot of provincial talent, especially from the NPC, that I won't forget. But the biggest things for me was bringing in the bus, the king. Julian Savia comes in. I think he'll be huge to play in the 12 or 14 jersey. That man can ball, as we all know. Obviously, with that utility play for this Hurricane, sets him up perfectly to probably take over the Levi Almua role. And man, his playmaking ability is insane. While he is old and definitely has lost a step, hey, it all happens to the best of us, but the bus is still the bus. He is still a man to be feared, and I can't wait to see him in the blue jersey. As for the rest of their team, they bring in Sama Malolo, one of my favorite power hookers from the MLR, specifically the San Diego Legion. Malolo brings a lot of power. He has a great low center of gravity. We've seen it in the World Cup stage. He can ball on test level for Samoa, and I can't wait to see him develop under Tana Umaga in this team. Savonia Havili from the Crusaders was another huge signing for me. He was a center of my fantasy team. Shout out again to Super Brew. He is consistent. He gets turnovers. He wins at the gain line, gets extra meters, and his tackles, my God, his tackles are insane. I have yet to see a lot of guys from the Crusaders hit like that. He brings a lot of poly power to the lineup. They also bring in a couple guys who I'd like to highlight from their NPC days. Shout out to Flo for giving me some of their stats. Samesi Paya from, sorry if I butchered your name, from the Bay of Plenty, as a big-time lock and center cover, as well as he also plays utility for the back row. This guy is huge. He plays with power. He has an unlimited motor, kind of almost TJ Watt-esque for my NFL fans out there. His motor does not stop. He is a big boy. His cousin actually earned the bench press for the Cowboys, and in terms of all-time record at the Combine, he has a lot of pedigree behind his name, and will definitely show it out, as well as another couple signings that I think a lot of people won't really know, but I thought were kind of cool. They bring in Pepe Sana Patefilo from the Satyrs. Obviously he has a lot of questions involving him because of his injuries, but he definitely shows up talent when he's on the pitch. He'll probably come off the bench in limited minutes, but he can easily compete for that, and I definitely think he'll be a relative star in that Moana lineup, as well as probably my second biggest signing in terms of the backs outside of the bus. They bringing back Nigel Wong. For those of you who don't know, he is the big back out of Samoa who shined in the World Cup stages. I'm glad to see him come back from injury. He's going to be huge for that lineup as well. I think obviously having a lot more back firepower is going to be huge for them. They can't always run out of the centers like they did last year. This is a much more diversified lineup in terms of what they bring to the table, and leave a lot of no questions asked on this roster as to where they could go. Excuse me. Obviously, another big thing for them is tons of veteran leadership. I think the bus, retaining guys like Sikope Kepu, retaining guys like Christian Leali'ifano is huge. And, they can only develop. They can only go up from here. They've done well last year. In fact, you could argue they probably could have pushed for a spot for the quarterfinal if they didn't lose a couple close games. But, it being as it may, past is the past. We'll see what happens with them. Moving back over to New Zealand, though, we do have a couple questions down south in terms of the Canes. I think the Canes have lost a lot of valuable veteran leadership, specifically Dane Coles and Artie Savia, and are definitely on the rebuild. These last two teams, also the Lanyards, spoiler alert, are really rebuilding following their coaches' firings, or in the Canes case, getting called to the All Blacks. Clark Laidlaw, the former coach for the All Black Sevens team, will be their head coach. I saw them in LA Sevens. They look insane. Obviously with Carlos Spencer's son leading that team, it was a lights out show. I think given that their team was built the way it was, I definitely could see them obviously feeding more off of Aiden Morgan and the boys in the back row, especially with Celeste Riossi and company kind of bringing back that flair to the back line. Obviously, the team, through James Blackwell, who they also lost through Artie Savia, will definitely see less forward contribution and dominance when it comes to how the way the attack is done. But we will see with that. A lot of their guys are relatively athletic, semi-skinny athletes, especially in the forwards like Duplessis Karifi. It'll be nice to see what he can do with that. I would love to see Ruben Love shine at 15 or 10 in this lineup. Ruben Love is one of my favorite players. He reminds me of a young Bowden Barrett. His downhill ability, his ability to play at the line is huge. I think when he will definitely get an All Blacks call, not just a Maori All Blacks or an All Blacks 15. He deserves a spot, and Clark Laidlaw is a perfect man to open it up, because Kane Spencer is basically a more rounded out version, in my opinion, of Ruben Love. As for questions for this lineup, biggest question for me is definitely in the forward pack. Obviously you lose Owen Franks, you lose Artie Savia, you lose James Blackwell, you lose Reed Prinsep. There's a lot of questions in terms of who's going to lead that pack based off of veteran leadership. They're probably going to go through the front row for that one, or Duplessis Karifi. But obviously the biggest thing for me is availability, and Karifi has been unavailable, whether it's to injury or suspension. You can't guarantee he's going to be on the pitch. So really, who's it going to be on? That's going to be my question moving forward. Perhaps Blake Gibson. Obviously he led the Blues in a couple stints, but we'll see. Also, you lose Jamie Booth, who had moments of brilliance in that backfield with Savia and the boys, but for you to see ate a lot of you guys. Big storylines for me, though, is whether or not TJ Perenara would lose his second choice spot. I think it's basically cemented that Cam Roygard is going to be the choice 9 for this team. But with the signing of Richard Judd from the San Diego Legion is going to be huge for them in terms of questions of TJ Perenara's skills. For those of you who do not watch the MLR and only watch Super Rugby or other provincial comps, Richard Judd, for me, was one of the better 9s at the spot, in terms of the MLR. He brings in a lot. He's an upright runner, but he also plays with a lot of ability to just run support lines. He's a great runner off of that. He can easily set up tries. He has powerful kicking legs, and his passing is relatively accurate and quick off the jump. He's played very quick ball with, the Legion, and their offloading ability obviously has been overstated, but we'll see. I think he can do it. TJ obviously probably beats them out in that athletic defensive standpoint. But and if they're going for an attack mindset, which they obviously are kind of leaning towards, that could be Richard Judd's time to shine. So we'll see with that, as well as the signing of Nani Punivai, and can he crack the lineup? He had a couple moments with the Chiefs Academy and Chiefs in his limited minutes and mostly preseason play. I definitely think he's a forgotten talent in that deep roster, but with the Hurricanes can show it off, especially with the departure of Jamie Booth. How he cracks the lineup is yet to be seen. It's really just how he really uses that chip on his shoulder mentality to push himself forward over the line and show off what he can do. He can earn a spot in most places, I think, if he plays it right. He just has to use his opportunity wisely, and this is one of them. Good luck to you, my man. As for the last team down in Dunedin, the Landers, honestly, I have a lot of questions. A lot of your signings, I did not watch a lot of them on film. A lot of them are, spoiler alert, a lot of from the NPC and provincial play. So because I get limited coverage, I can't exactly watch film on all of these guys. So my impact to their signings, which is mostly from there, is a little limited. But I believe that obviously Jamie Joseph is no idiot, and they'll definitely rebuild. And I'm sure they have some developmental potential, but high ceiling wise, I don't really know yet. In terms of scheme, they'll probably lean back towards that Japanese forward dominant system, leading off of Billy Harmon. Spoiler alert, it is his team now. I think we figured this out. Kind of turning that Michael H. Kazuki Himeno hybrid role of dominating through big forward quick ball and then shifting out wide to the finishers. They have a lot of guys in that back line, despite the loss of Thomas Umaga Jensen, that can finish. And, with Josh Dixon and Sandy Frizzell gone, they're going to need a lot of athletes, and I think they brought that in from the NPC. I think my biggest question for them would be their 10 jersey. They clean house. I was kind of surprised when Freddie Burns left and went back to Japan. Marty Banks, who I thought was pretty serviceable when he was there, is gone. Mitch Hunt, dude, what happened to you, my boy? You were like a shining star, 2-3 years ago, and then you fell off a cliff the last couple years. When it comes to kicking and game management, I don't know, but all of them are gone. I really thought Freddie Burns could have stayed, but maybe they're going for something younger. A lot of them are from the academy or from the NPC. So, that's my biggest question, is how they kind of slot and where they compete. Perhaps that'll be a big narrative in the offseason as they move through camp to see who separates themselves, who starts, and obviously the shakeup if something happens in the middle of the year. But I definitely have the Landers probably below the Hurricanes, unfortunately still in that last spot. It is what it is. We'll see who can really push themselves and separate themselves in the next few months going up into season, and especially late. For all of us who watch rugby is made in the weeks before the playoffs, and the Landers showed up and showed out for those last couple bits. Maybe they do better. Jamie Joseph's a quality coach. Who knows? They might even move up to third in the New Zealand Conference rankings. But we'll see. For me, the book is still out on them. As for power rankings, I'll do it by region and then playoffs. I don't really like to do just because general power rankings, just because of the fact that Australia doesn't really have an independent creator that releases the type of signings that they get. So it's really just if I happen to see if the Reds sign anyone special or the Rebels sign, another Nella Tupou, etc. So we'll just be going off of region and what I saw last year, and we'll go from there. As for New Zealand, we'll do it for the easy one. I definitely think the Chiefs will have to be the number one seed, regardless of how they've lost in the finals repeatedly. They are still a force. They definitely are a team with great development potential and a lot of good signings. As for the second place, it's going to be really hard for me to knock off the Satyrs for what they do. They're always in the mix for the playoffs. As I've said, they're consistently great. Despite what I say about them, they have quality. I hate to say it, but they're going to always be in the mix. I think for me, Moana Pacifica, until further notice, would have taken that second spot. But for me, they're going to have to move to third and prove to me they belong in that second spot. Tana Umaga is going to open up that playbook for them. He's going to let the boys play. And with the signings they have, they definitely have a lot of firepower to do so. They showed off a lot of it with a lot of close games last year. I think they can turn these around and make these an above 500 team and be in the mix for that second seed for a Super Rugby quarterfinal. Fourth, I'm going to have the Blues. The Blues have always slid. They start really great in every game in most of the season, and they end terribly. And I think it'll continue again. Just because you have the stats and the quality team doesn't necessarily mean you're in the championship. I think Vern Cotter is going to have a lot to deal with his first year. I'm not going to say they're going to tank in the way that Leon McDonald did in his first couple years, but they're going to have to play above their weight to really prove to a lot of New Zealand teams that they can be in there, just not off of stats, just off of discipline alone. Turnovers and penalties were the big thing that hurt them. Ill discipline late. They have to fix that. And obviously, the Fijians were not the most disciplined in the world. So it's yet to be seen to me. I think the book is out on them. I think for me, in terms of who's going to go up, based off of last year's performance, despite what I may say about the Landers, they could be in that fifth spot. I hope they don't tank again this year as bad as they did last year and the last couple years. Excuse me, but it is going to be a race to see who can get last place, who doesn't get last place, because the Landers are going to lean a lot on that NPC talent, obviously, as I've said just before. But if I look at their last performance when they were vying for that, push out of last place with Billy Harmon and the boys, they have a shot. Billy Harmon's a quality captain. He'll lead them, to the end of time. I really think that he's a good quality leader. I think they're in a better spot than in terms of forward-wise than the Hurricanes. So we'll see. But, as we all know, the jungle and the zoo in Dunedin and Forsyth Bar is kind of a nasty place when it wants to be. The Landers always making an upset of most teams. I think they'll be in the mix. I hope the Cranes aren't on the last place, but as of right now, I hate to say it, they're probably going to be last for me in at least the New Zealand power rankings. Despite what I just said about how their ceiling is there, just if we look at last year's performance, they didn't shine where I thought they could. They lost very winnable games. A lot of it shouldn't have come down to Jordy Barrett missing off the boot. They, like the Blues, have the potential to be better, but they don't necessarily reach their ceiling. But we'll see if their ceiling actually proves itself, with obviously a lot of things going right the way I hope for them. Then we'll see what happens, and hopefully Ruben Love will push them above, probably the fourth. Who knows? They might even get third. But as of right now, my book is still out. We're going to have to see. They, along with the Landers, have the most to prove to me as to whether or not I should write them out or not come midseason. As for Australia, I think it's obvious for me. The Drua have to be the number one slot. They're an effective team. They really play well, and they're just going to reload and come right back into the mix in terms of being in title contention. The Brumbies, same like the Crusaders, have to always be there. Everyone knows them for their back three. Everyone knows them for Ala Alatoa and the boys and James Slipper. They have a great team. I'm surprised he doesn't have the Wallaby job. But, we'll see. The Brumbies will obviously continue to be that clinical team in Australia. I hope the Taz, spoiler alert, they're my third team, will move up in that spot instead. But we'll see. As for the Taz, obviously they're my third spot. I think Darren Coleman has built a massive team based off of the Giltini's weight for my MLR fans, and really just forward dominance. With Angus Bell leading the boys, you have a lot of things to go off of. You have young guys in the back, as long as they can get them back off the injury and, hopefully pull a couple things here and there, they can be in the mix for that 2 spot. But I think for me, easily in the third. They are an above average team. They work hard, and they're in most games, despite getting blown out in a couple instances. they hold out to the bitter end. And I think that's something that, for my Chiefs fans, for my Landers fans, you love to see, because no matter win or lose, you're still in the mix. You're still fired. And that's what matters, I think, as a player and as a team landscape wise. I think for me, the Rebels are going to have to be up there just because of how they play with Carter Gordon in that lineup. Getting Nella Tupou is huge for them in their front row. Pairing up with Jordan Uelisi and the boys, it's going to be nice. I can't wait to see them play. Melbourne, get back to your roots. Go back-to-back play. You have the boys. Let's get it done. I want to see some Billy Meeks, some Adam Ashley Cooper magic. I think you got it in you. You got this. I think for my fifth team, it's going to have to be the Reds. Despite losing what they did, they showed a lot last year, despite losing a lot of winnable games, just like the Hurricanes. They're kind of in that I'm kind of writing you off stage, but we'll see what happens with that. As for my sixth team, it's going to have to go down to, unfortunately, the Western Force. You guys are always teetering on that will they, won't they stage. Just signing veteran talent, I don't see you guys moving far higher up. I think the Reds can rebuild and reload off of this despite losing their head coach. So we'll see what happens with you guys. Again, a lot to prove. Props to you. If you can do better, do better. If not, oh well. I guess I got it right. I can't really lose, I guess, at that rate. But that's going to be really it for that. In terms of playoffs, I would love to see the Drew win. I do not, realistically, maybe they'll get second place, but I would love to see them and the Chiefs in the final. I think it'll be an insane match. Make it in Suva. Have it be insane. The Chiefs are well known for their Fijian flair and also playing in Suva. I think this will be nice to have. The Drew are a great team. They contended for the semifinal. Unfortunately, they got the short end of the stick playing, I believe it was the Satyrs last year. I don't think they're going to have that problem this year. They are great and they will perform at a high level. I think for me, the third seed, probably going to lose in the quarterfinal to the Chiefs. Hopefully, cross my fingers, is going to be the Satyrs. I've said it once, I've said it again. Consistency is going to win you championships, and that's where the Crusaders make their money. That's going to be huge. I think for my fourth spot, it's kind of a toss-up. I wanted to put the Brumbies in there just to represent Australia, but I really see Moana Pacifica making a pitch for that fourth spot in the quarterfinals. I think they'll probably lose to the Drua. I think that would be a great island-to-island matchup to prove their weight. Moana, if they make their ceiling, can get there this year. I really do think so. And the Brumbies, I think, would be a great toss-up for them in that role. We'll see what happens. Up the boys in Pacifica, we would love to see you there. That's going to do it for me in terms of my Super Rugby special episode. But in terms of domestic rugby, MLR fans, have hope. Have a little bit of consistency, though. I did see a lot of discussions, I would say, in terms of where does the MLR not only just rank domestically in the Americas, but also in the international stage in terms of where they rank in the provincial rugby comps. I think I'll go through kind of a breakdown of where I think they rank in all. I think obviously in American sports, they're never really, it'll be really hard for them to do this, to get above the MLS in terms of where fan engrossment is, selling out stadiums, the passion on the sidelines, the signings, obviously with Lionel Messi joining. Unless Bowden Barrett or someone magical joins Miami, it's going to be very hard for the MLR to stand up, at least in the free agency portion of where we're at and their mission of developing Eagles. In that regard, they've developed a lot of Eagles, but obviously the Eagles are not great and they're kind of a tier 3 nation. So meh. In that regard, they're basically just a transfer portal for other countries to send their players to develop here, kind of like a minor league, and ship them out. And same thing for our players in the USA. If they have foreign eligibility, they're probably going to take that. They get better development, better money, and obviously more minutes. USA Rugby is still in tatters. I think they have to improve in that regard. So domestically, they're still going to be obviously the ugly little stepchild kind of basically scenario for USA in terms of domestic comps. Let's see, where they rank in the world. I think for me, starting normally would have to be France, just because of their pay rate, their ability to develop players, bring in stars from international talent, sell out crowds, grow the game. They've done a great job. Obviously with the turnover of French rugby is cannot be overstated. They're a huge proponent of world rugby development. I think the World Cup has shown that, and it will continue to prove that moving forward. As for second, I probably would have to go for Japan. Their ability to grow the game. The Japanese are a very, very passionate rugby fan base. I would argue it's probably gonna be up there with baseball in terms of sport rankings, in terms of where fans really want to spend their money. Obviously their ability to bring in big star players and keep them there happy, not only with checks, but also with just, the ability to play the way they want, with coaches they want, with some of them playing with their old friends like Quade Cooper with Will Genia. They grow the game, and they actually don't have any problems. So I would probably have to put them there. Super Rugby for me would have to be third. It's just because of their declining attendance. They should honestly be second or first in the world, but between declining attendance, between lack of, until really this year, attention to the NPC players and roots and a lot of women's games, they have to be in there. They obviously don't pay as well, so that's another thing. But their games are lights out. Opportunities with the All Blacks would be there as well. Fourth, I probably would put the Premiership. Despite blowing up basically 3 teams, you still have sold out stadiums like my Sail Sharks of the AJ Bell. You have great matchups, the talent they develop. Their international team, despite what my musings about them were, they did make it to a semifinal. So I can't really get them, too indicted on their rights, but England is England, and they're going to be there. And unfortunately, America is last. And, it's because of where the USC Eagles are, because of debt collection, because of teams getting blown up every year, because of lack of fan engrossment. Every time I go to an MLR game, I maybe see, if I'm lucky, 2,500 people. And I'm sure it'll grow. I think it is still the fastest growing sport in America. I think that stat is not to be overstated. And I definitely think that our help through the youth, again, shout out to Rugby LA for giving me an opportunity to coach the next generation, is huge. And, we'll see the next generation of Eagles come up. A lot of our sevens teams are really good, but 15s we have yet to show up. So given that and the financial troubles, you're going to have to be last. Will the scandals end? I doubt it. Whether it's with teams like the Arrows or the league losing George Kilbrew, who knows? USA is like the Dallas Cowboys or World Rugby. You have the athletes. You technically have the money, but you can never put it together and win a championship for whatever reason. And especially broadcast quality. Get it up. But that's going to be it for me. This is the longest episode I've ever done. This officially eclipses the World Cup episode and our World Rugby episode. Man, this is an insane time. I can't wait to see for next season. If episodes keep coming out like this, hey, all for it. Glad to see you guys. Hope to see you next week. Peace.